Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of The Terri Cole Show. I'm so happy that you're hanging out with me today, as I always am. I want to ask you a couple of questions. Let's say you're dating someone and they don't get back to you right away, or you ask your friend to give you a call later and they don't do it. How often do you take those things personally? How often do you feel victimized by those things or feel unimportant? Do you have the ability to sort of cut other people slack when things like that happen, or does it feel very personal? If you're nodding your head yes, and even if you're not, this episode is for you, because we're going to be talking all about the difference between victim mentality and being a victim. These two things they don't have to be connected. And actually, they're very different. And I think it is an important and powerful distinction to make. So that's what we're going to do. But before we get into it, if you happen to be new to my channel, introduce yourself in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell, because I do know that 67% of you who watch regularly are not subscribed for some reason, and I do not know why. So, hi, it doesn't cost you anything. I don't kill you with ads on these things, right? I really have so much respect for your time, and I have so much appreciation for you being here. And you could appreciate me back by subscribing if you're not subscribed. Also, I want you to hit the bell so that you get notified every time I roll out something new, which is every Tuesday and every Thursday. Yes, so subscribe, hit the bell, just do it. Okay. Thanks for being here, as always, and let's move it on into today's episode. So we're making the distinction between being a victim and victim mentality. So who is more susceptible to having a victim mentality? Well, part of it is if you interpret these experiences in life, if you take everything personally, you're more likely to live in a victim mentality state, right? If you take it all personally, instead of maybe considering that your friend had a day as exhausted and fell asleep or something, rather than like trying to snub you, or instead of assuming that the date is like trying to make you feel bad by not getting back, or that the stranger on the street was angry with something because they had a scowl on their face and you felt like they were looking at you, or that they bumped into you and didn't notice you were there, and that feels personal. I think that for a lot of people have a tendency to be able to overcome these types of things, or just negotiate them, right? We're managing them because we're out in the world. Like, these things are going to happen, and they're an unavoidable part of living in society. But there are people who fall into the camp of feeling like perpetual victims. A social scientist, Rahav Gabe, and her colleagues define this tendency for interpersonal victimhood as an ongoing feeling that the self is a victim, which is generalized across many kinds of relationships. As a result, victimization becomes a central part of the individual's identity. So, if you constantly or consistently have a victimhood mindset, there is a tendency, rather than to feel like you have an internal locus of control, meaning you have control over things, you have a tendency to have an external locus of control, believing. And the way that I always say it, you guys, and those of you who've been around for a while, seeing as how this podcast is turning 10 in September, I talk a lot about when we become empowered through the therapeutic process, when we're on this evolutionary path, we can go from feeling like we're a teeny boat and our life is like this massive tsunami that's just sort of throwing us around. It's like life is happening to us. That's having a perception of an external locus of control. Where as we get healthier, we realize, oh, we have the power to be the tsunami, or to be the weather, or to be the storm, or to be the energy, or to be the GPS that directs our own lives, and that our life can be the little boat where we're in much more control. People who have an external locus of control a lot of times believe that what happens in your life is like luck. It's what other people want to happen. It's fate. Like, all of this language creates this sense of lack of responsibility, right? Lack of feeling empowered in our own life. And so there was research that was done, and that the tendency for interpersonal victimhood, right? There's 4 main areas: constantly seeking recognition for one's victimhood. So I understand that, right? Where it's interesting. When I was traumatized by a medical situation that happened when I had cancer in my early 30s, I was so traumatized by how mishandled the situation was that required me to have the same surgery less than 6 months later, the same radiation, like it was just hell. And I was most definitely traumatized. Hey, I was getting help. Obviously, I was in trauma therapy. I was doing my thing. But I couldn't stop seeking recognition for my victimhood in that particular scenario, where it didn't matter. I could have bumped into, I did. I bumped into someone on 38th and 8th in New York City. I was going to a meeting somewhere, and I remember distinctly, I hadn't seen this person in probably 3 years. And they're like, "How you doing?" I'm like, "You're never going to believe what happened to me." I went to, and I won't say the name of the hospital that claims to have the best cancer care anywhere, and I'm literally torturing this person who I haven't seen in 3 years with all the gory details. And if that isn't seeking recognition for my own victimhood, I don't know what is. Now, this would be more of a problem and more of a mindset if I didn't get past that through the trauma work that I did and being in therapy and talking about, and really actually having my mother. She was like, "Babe, you have to stop talking about this. Like, you're fine. What is going on? Like, we're just so grateful you're okay." But it was interesting. There was a part of me that was like, yeah, but I'm not just okay. What I went through was hellacious and avoidable. That was really part of the thing, that because there was this mishandling of it the first time around, that I think it was such an ego injury for me because I felt like it was avoidable and I'd been through hell and back with it. Anyway, look at me. Look at me right now, just seeking recognition from you for my victimhood. Anyway, no, I'm not. But I understand that. And it becomes a problem when it's chronic, when it's continual, and when it's in everything. All right, so that was number 1. The second thing is moral elitism. Okay, I don't need to explain that to you. It's like feeling like you are morally superior to other people. The third thing they found in people who have this tendency for interpersonal victimhood is lack of empathy for the pain and suffering of others, which I find really interesting. And the fourth one is frequently ruminating about past victimization. So let's make a distinction right now that it is normal. If you have a traumatic experience, a dramatic experience, if you have a painful experience, but actual trauma where you thought you could have died from the experience, or that very dramatic, like left a real mark on you, it takes a certain period of time for us to get past that. There's a normal amount of time for us to have a traumatic reaction to traumatic events. So 3 to 6 months, sometimes it's 6 months to a year. When I was held up at gunpoint many years ago, I had all the telltale symptoms of post-traumatic stress syndrome, but it really wasn't that. Even though they were the telltale signs, because I was getting help, I was just having a traumatic response, which is intrusive memories, nightmares, feeling unsafe in my home, even with, a big alarm system, even with a pit bull, even with a knife under my bed, like under my pillow, like nothing made me feel safe. But that actually is a normal traumatic response to being held up at gunpoint. So for me, I started seeing my symptoms abating. That's a different experience than frequently ruminating about past victimization, because once you move through it therapeutically, those symptoms start to fade. So it's way, way less. I was way less afraid to be alone. There was all of these things. So I knew I was on a healing path. But this is really interesting. Don't worry, I'll put this information for you in the guide, terricole.com/guide, so you can see it. Because it's important to point out, basically, that the research on this victim mindset is not implying that it doesn't equate experiencing trauma and victimization, actual victimization, right, with possessing the victim mindset, right? You could have a victim mindset. It could develop without experiencing severe trauma or victimization at all. And the opposite is also true. Experiencing severe trauma or victimization doesn't necessarily mean that someone is going to develop a victimhood mindset. So I think it's important that there's clarity there. Either way, the victim mindset and victimization, they share a certain amount of consequences in our lives and what we do. So what is the victim mindset? So we're going through these now, right? Constantly seeking recognition for your victimhood. So this is something where we just can't, it's a perpetual need to have your suffering be acknowledged by others. And, listen, to a degree, it's a normal response to trauma. We get this, right? Experiencing trauma is brutal. And it really does sort of break down. For me, it really broke down the way that I saw the world, right? Like, I could make no more positive assumptions. It made me be like, wow, there are bad people out there and bad things can happen to me. So recognizing there's nothing wrong with recognizing your victimhood when you have been victimized. That's not what we're talking about. It's really about not being able to let it go, right? And a lot of times, like we're saying, people who end up with this victimhood mindset have not even had traumatic experiences. It's just the way of seeing yourself. The moral elitism, this is like a defense mechanism that can develop against deeply painful emotions. We can hold on to a positive self-image this way. So we don't look at our own shadows, basically, right? So we project those shadows onto other people. So the other person is the one with all the aggression, even though you have aggression inside of you. It's like a projection type thing, which allows yourself to be perceived as sort of the one who was wronged, right? To be the one who is martyred, to be vulnerable, to be morally superior to the other. What I find really interesting in this study is about the lack of empathy for pain and suffering of others. So people who ended up scoring high on the victim mindset scale, that they're oblivious to the pain and suffering of others. And that it's interesting because they're so self-obsessed with what happened to them. So ignoring the suffering of others, right? Taking more for themselves while leaving less for others. I don't know. It's like when you have this victimhood mindset, it's like you feel like you've done your share of suffering. So you don't have to care about other people anymore. And the last thing that I had talked about is the 4 things, is the frequently ruminating about past victimization. And it's interesting. It's like I've told this story before. Maybe you've heard it, maybe not. But I went to a wedding and I sat next to someone and she literally introduced herself and she was like, "Oh, hi, I'm Betty. Yeah, I've been divorced for 18 years. Yeah, I mean, he just stepped out. I mean, listen, nobody gets married wanting to get divorced. But he basically just stepped out and, with the secretary. And it's so that's what she's ruminating about her past victimization with me. And I didn't even know her. This is like deep, that this person feels so identified by being wronged in this way that that's literally the first thing she said to me. We were just sitting next to each other at a wedding. Like I literally had never met her before in my life. And I thought that was interesting. So what can we do, right? What can we do if you're feeling this way, if you're like, this is interesting, what can you do? And how do we shift out of this mindset? So I think that, part of it is look at the culture that we live in, right? There is so many people out here making money off trauma stuff, people who have no business teaching about trauma, telling you they're going to fix your trauma in a weekend. So in a way, social media, I really feel like has harmed us in this respect because there's so much trying to fit these complex psychological situations into like a 30-second soundbite for TikTok or whatever it is. It's just not like that. And if everything we experience is categorized as trauma, like everything can't be trauma, then nothing is trauma, right? The whole thing of being victimized in a real way loses its power. So I feel like there's a lot of emphasis on victimhood identity, and it's something that I really feel like we have to look at, like, are we doing that to ourselves? Are we identifying in that way? Because there's growth. Like we can move out of this process. This, if you're like, yes, I have a victimhood mindset, then personal growth mindset is what we're looking for, right? We want a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset, right? Our traumas don't have to define us. And it's funny, I've personally been really committed to not having that be the case for me. It makes me so mad, right? Because I'm like, no one identifies me but me. And I've really stuck to that in my life, where I'll deal with it. What happened to you isn't you, and it doesn't have to define you. And all of the things I experienced that I shared in this podcast episode happened to me and influenced who I became, right? So as my friend Chris Carr would say, I won't call getting held up at gunpoint and having cancer a gift, because I sure as hell wouldn't give it to you, right? But I learned so much about myself, and I changed my life from those experiences. And I don't like to be myself personally to be identified. I mean, as in the beginning, like I shared, like I was super identified because I had been victimized and I was so mad about it. And it took 2 years probably for me to get over that and move into the growth. But it's possible. I really believe that it's possible to grow from trauma. There's a whole school of thought, which is post-traumatic growth, right? What happens to us after trauma? How can we shift the paradigm in our own mind of what happened, right? Is that you can take what happened to you and turn it into a growth experience without being hyper-positive, without bypassing the important stuff. I mean, listen, we still have to process things, you guys, right? Like, we still have to do the work. And another thing that could be influencing you is, do you come from a long line? Are you from a culture that actually has been victimized for centuries? Many, many people come from marginalized cultures and communities, and it's not a victimhood mentality per se. They've actually been victimized in a real way, and that influences collective identity, solo identity, all of those things. So there's a lot that goes into this, but there's a great book on this topic called Rise Above by Scott Barry Kaufman, PhD. And I'll put the link to his book in the show notes and in the guide. So go to terricole.com/guide, because so much of what I was talking about today was inspired by Scott's work. And I just find it fascinating that the benefits of being able to move through victimization, learn from it, honor it, right? So we can integrate it into the beautiful, unique tapestry of our lives. It's not about shoving it down. It's not about denying it, but it's also not about keeping it going. And I want to make sure that we're all super clear that being victimized in a real way, having something happen to you that's traumatic, is not the same as having a victimhood mentality. They're two totally different things. And being victimized, yes, can create a victimhood mentality, and you cannot be traumatized and still have a victimhood mentality. So I hope that that's clear. I would love to know your thoughts on this. For a little bit of a deeper dive, get the guide, terricole.com/guide. I hope that you enjoyed this episode of The Terri Cole Show. And don't forget, I have the Terri Cole membership, which you want to check it out at terricole.com/TCM, where we will keep this conversation going and so many others. I hope you guys have the most amazing week. And as always, take care of you.